All right. You know what it is? You know who it is? We're back. Today I got the legend Killian Hamilton on. Really excited about this one. Um, this is one I've been actually thinking about when I actually reached out to you. Uh, I was pretty excited you said yes. So I'm excited to talk about this. How's everything going with you right now up in Canada and just, doing your thing?
Uh, Pretty good, man. Like I'm busy on the work side of things. Obviously, like I'm lucky enough I get to work with people that don't live in
Yeah.
Toronto where I live. But we're locked down right now, so training is a bit crazy. Like I commute like almost 2 hours a day trying to get a workout in. But yeah, for the most part, man, works busy, which is always great, and I get to work with a ton of cool people.
Yeah, and I kind of want to talk about that in a couple minutes, but just to give you guys
Yeah.
some background, Killian is a part of Prescript, and I had Jordan on the podcast a couple months ago, I think, at this point. So you might be familiar with Prescript. If you're not, Killian's he's a part of them. He's someone I love listening to. If you ever listen to the RX Radio, which is their podcast, him and your co-host now, essentially, right?
Pretty much, man.
Yeah.
Pretty
Yeah.
much.
So him and Jordan crush it. They have some really good episodes, especially the last three. So if you guys got a chance, definitely go listen to those. I know about you. I don't know your whole story, so I kind of want to go from like telling me about, or us, I guess, about how you kind of got to where you are and your journey into being a part of Prescript and coming into the light that you've come into.
Yeah, man. It's I guess it's sometimes I say it's pretty crazy, but I think that's just a fucking phrase I use all the time. I just go, "Oh, it's pretty crazy." But it's a good way of deflecting any details. But no, it's pretty cool, man. Like I've been in this industry almost a decade now. Um, Whether or not like working directly with clients in like a commercial gym setting or in like coaching perspective, or like competing in sports myself. And then probably 3 years ago now, I kind of just decided to like take the plunge into going into this with like a lot more intention than I had previously. But no, man, like I got into the serious part of fitness and coaching about 8 years ago. I started working at a commercial gym. I was competing at powerlifting at the time. Was taking a bunch of certifications, reading a lot of books. Competing myself, I competed for 7 years in powerlifting before I tried to make a break at bobsled.
Oh
Uh,
wow, okay.
Not realizing that bobsledders aren't 5'7" and 175 pounds. So it's a stark reality check in that arena. But no, man, the working with Prescript's been pretty exciting. Me and Jordan meeting was like a really chance happening. We have a mutual friend, Jordan Moffat, who owns Bacon and Barbells, which is a
Okay.
wicked clothing line for people who like pork or barbells or both. So ended up going to dinner with Jordan Moffat and Shallow. My friend said, "Hey, do you want to meet the muscle doc?" And I went, "Ah, no, sounds like a douchebag." And he's like, "Nah, man, like he's actually pretty cool." So I tagged along. We went for sushi. Me and Jordan just started talking. He was telling me what Prescript does,
Yeah.
and I pulled up this like really poorly made infographic. I probably made on Microsoft Paint or something. I don't know how to use a computer. I was like, "Oh man, like this is this like skill acquisition model that I use." And Jordan looked at it and he was like, "Man, it's pretty much what Prescript does."
Yeah.
And then a couple months later, he called me. He was doing a seminar here in Canada, and he said, "Hey, do you want to come help out and shoot the shit?" So I went out to the seminar, helped teach a few things, just based on my perspective of what Prescript does, and then from there it was just kind of an organic growth with Prescript, moving from a coaching role to now I'm the director of programming and innovation, which is pretty neat. So I get to work really hands on with all the courses that we offer, the certifications that we offer in terms of um, creating them from the ground up and really finding purpose in them. So it's a really motivating thing to do. And then from there, my own coaching business has just kind of blown up, man, and
Yeah.
snowballed in the wildest way possible. Like there's no way I could have said in March I would see what I do now or the lifestyle I have now. So it's been, ultimately exciting. And I have tremendous gratitude for, Shallow for kind of giving me the mic and letting me say crazy stuff on the radio.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I remember the first time I heard you from there. You guys are talking about the skill acquisition template. So, or just your ideas on skill acquisition. And like I said, it was, I mean, I think like Jordan said, like it's just, it was really good setup you have and like an idea around it. That's really cool. And I think the first time you were on the RX Radio podcast was what, like probably a couple years ago at this point, or was it a year?
I think about a year ago now. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
so like somewhere around there. And like I said, I remember the first time they kind of mentioned you, and they were saying like, I remember Jordan was like, "Oh, this guy looks exactly like me," and I was like, "Yeah, he actually does." So, but yeah, that's really cool. And like I said, I know that as you've been more involved in Prescript and you're getting your voice out there, I've seen kind of your growth on Instagram, and I've like followed it and seen you from, I don't know what you were doing before business wise or like job wise, but like now you're I know hear about you having the full client list. I always see you talking about like filling the spots and having a couple left. So I think that's where we're all trying to get. So business wise, like how has your attitude and kind of like your business in general changed over the past year, and then through COVID, and then because of this like influx of people you've had, and I don't know if it's a short time, but like I'd say it's relatively short time, right?
Yeah, man. Like I'm not a closed book at all when it comes to that. Like I prior to this was working in a commercial gym setting.
Hmm.
I had about 15 or 16 clients. So I think like everybody who works in a commercial gym, probably working like 12, 13 hours a day. Like first client's 5 a.m., last client's like 7 p.m., working Saturdays or Sundays. And then when COVID happened, obviously gym shut down. And I kind of took the back seat and had to sit at home. And for the clients I was already working with in person, I was just sending them whatever I could in terms of at home. And I kind of saw that, we were supposed to be locked down for whatever it was, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 3 months. And then it really didn't seem like that was going to be a thing. So I thought like, there's no way I can just sit here at this point. I got to kind of, I guess the word that everybody likes to use is pivot, but
Yeah.
I think the word I would use is like, I just got to fucking pay my rent. So I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to piece out on the in-person. It seems like a pretty sketchy business model at this point. And it's not that it always was. And like, it was dude, in-person training is the most terrible business model. Like
Yeah.
you want to create a ceiling to what you can make and just demonetize yourself as a human being, then train people in person.
Yeah.
But no, like I've made tremendous friends around the world since like taking 2 minutes to use Instagram. Like I coach people in Dubai, Australia, Germany, UK, all over the States. I train like 12 people in Minnesota. I've never even been to I don't even know where Minnesota is on a map. So it's just crazy, right? But yeah, the online business, like March 15th, I had 2 clients online that I think lived down the block from me, and I was just sending them programming. And then March, April, May, I think I had 8 clients online. August, I had 26. October 1st, I had 32. It's December. What date it is? December 7th, I have 44 online clients.
Wow.
And it's really just taken off, man. And I think on the business side of things, I just adopted the same idea I had adopted when I worked in-person training, which I think I talked about this on a podcast. Like every day I would go to work, I'd have written down how much money I needed to make by the end of the day.
Yeah.
And dude, I still do that every single day. I wake up and I have like the 44 clients that I train have divided how much I'm going to make for the month over the course of the month, every day of the month. And I always set like a growth goal for myself in terms of how much more I want to make. And like, I just don't go to bed until I make that money. Like, I think oftentimes people are so, like so strangled and so held down by this idea of like, I have to be ready to do it. And I have to, have a plan, and I have to be better. There's this weird idea I find in the online fitness community of, there's number one, the thing everybody says to me is, well, everybody's doing it. Everybody's on Instagram, and I want to do it better than someone else. I want to set myself apart. Well, to be honest with you, I would never go to a bar that didn't have everybody in it. If you were walking down the street and there was a bar that had 100 people in it spilling out into the street, and there's a bar that had 2 people, why would you ever go into the bar that no one's in?
Yeah.
You always go to the bar that people are at, right? So it's like, to make the argument of like, well, everybody's already on Instagram. It's like, yeah, dude, that's where everybody is. Who are you going to find? Like, what are you going to do? Go on LinkedIn? Like, get the fuck out of here. But it's like, I just don't understand that argument, or the argument that it's like, well, I'm just going to wait until I can do it. I want to have a product that no one else has. It's like, you know what I want? Money that no one else has. So I think I'm just going to go coach people, and I'm just going to improve daily on my ability to coach people. Yeah. But there's a lot of people that are sitting there on Instagram or sitting at home going like, I want to get into online coaching, but I'm going to wait until I'm ready.
Mhm.
It's like, when I was ready, when I had rent to pay,
Yeah.
that might've been when I was ready.
Yeah, and I've had that conversation a bunch of times, and like I know I think I saw you're hopping on Kyle's podcast, but he talked about that a lot, and he talks about when you're, and this is just a conversation in general that you have. It's like when you need to do something, like you're gonna do it, and there's not really a ready for it. And like for myself, it's one of the things, and I don't know how you felt early on about the clients you were dealing with, and if you ever thought you'd get into the online space, but something I always thought about was the online space and like how there was room to grow there, and that it's at the same time, it's like there is Instagram. Like Instagram's there for a reason, and people are on it for a reason, and like that's where you're going to get a majority of your clientele, whether you're um, you know blowing up on there. You don't have to have, and that's the other thing, is like people mistake success with millions of followers, and like if you can monetize the small percentage of followers that you do have, you don't need to monetize that much. If you have 1,000 followers and you get 10% of them to pay you $200 a month, there you go. And like that's the thing that's I've turned my head to, is like really trying to become famous in my hometown. It's something I stick with because of there's a really good kind of idea from Kyle. And then in general, it's just about really making sure that you're getting better. And that's the biggest thing. And I've had conversations with coaches who, because I owned a gym for 3 years
Yeah.
in New York, and I just recently moved to Tennessee after I left the gym because of business partner problems. And then I moved to Tennessee just to kind of like restart and get another, like a start at it. And for me, when I was owning the gym, I saw it. And I'm sure you saw this too, because working in the actual space of personal training, there is a ceiling. And like when you own the facility, it's like you got to deal with the overhead, you got to deal with the employees, you got to deal with the client retention, and you got to deal with social media, cleaning, like all this stuff. When you can still make the impact that you want to have in a less stressful way, and almost the less stress you are, the more impact you're going to have. Obviously having a gym or a facility is nice, so you don't have to drive an hour. And you can touch on that a little bit, but like what is it, how easy has that transition been from in-person coaching into the online space? And have you had any hiccups? Has there been anything that you've like seen, or that you wish you did better from the start, or anything along those lines?
Yeah, man. Like I think it'd be pretty ignorant to say like there's no hiccups or no
Yeah.
improvements that can be made, right? And like I probably run a business that's 1,000% different today than I did March 1st. But I think the thing that I've realized with understanding what online coaching is, and honestly understanding what in-person coaching is, and I know I knocked, training people in person, but it's a thing that everyone has to do. Like you
Yeah, you
can't
have to,
coach
yeah.
online until you've coached in person, like 100%. And it's a thing, like there's a million trainers out there who coach people in person that are the greatest trainers in the world and should do that.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that you have to remember in a service industry is your service is only as valuable as it's perceived by the customer. So it's like, when it comes down to online coaching, a question that I ask a lot of people now that I wish I had asked people 9 months ago is just tell me what you want without putting a price on it first.
Yeah.
You're interested in one-on-one coaching, you're interested in mentorship, whatever it may be. You email me your perfect experience. I'll email you back what I believe is a cost that would motivate me to pick up the phone and do whatever that is for you.
Mhm.
Because I think people get trapped in not understanding the value of the service they provide and then not being able to provide the service that the other person finds valuable. Like, man, I have a client, I've never even seen his face. I don't even know what he looks like. And this dude is so happy with the service that we use. I send him a Google Sheet. He gets stronger. He emails me, send me the next week. I send him the next week. Every week we go back and forth. Still don't know what he looks like. He's jacked. Every time he sends me a video, he's benching and I can never see his face. But it's like that dude is entirely happy with the service.
Yeah.
I have another dude who probably sends me on average 12 to 19 messages or voice messages or videos a day.
Mhm.
That is an entirely different service,
Yeah.
right? I've got people who want me to be available while they're training.
Yeah.
That's an entirely different service.
Yeah.
But all of these people will only see value in what I do if I do those exact things for them individually.
Yeah.
I can't just send a Google sheet to the guy who wants to talk to me every day. I can't video message the guy who only wants a Google sheet, right? That would be annoying to him. So everyone's going to find, everyone's looking for their own value. And I think the thing we all lie to each other about is just none of us are open and asking for exactly what we want.
Yeah.
It's like, hey man, I want coaching, but I don't want this coaching. I want this experience. Well, that's fine. Like if that's the experience you want, it should be monetized as such, right? And the thing is if a service is $50 or a service is $1,000, if it's exactly what you want, it doesn't matter that it's $1,000 because you
Yeah.
got what you wanted out of it. If you want to bench 400 pounds and it costs what it costs and you bench 400 pounds, well, nobody's complaining. If it costs $50 and you want to bench 400 pounds and you bench 255, well, there's a big problem. There's a big discrepancy.
Yeah.
So I think what I've learned is like just straight up telling people, it's like, hey man, like I'm here to facilitate more bandwidth in your day. If you really look at what we do, the 90% of my clients are coaches themselves.
Yeah.
I'm not facilitating a program that they can't understand or they can't conceptualize. I'm buying them back bandwidth in their day. So like you or like me, they can build a business and they can take that time to do their own thing. They're not busy writing and adopting and watching their own videos. That's what I do.
Yeah.
And they can take the 4 hours back a week that I do that and they can go gain 4 clients themselves, right? So I facilitate extra bandwidth, whatever service that may be is the service I create.
Yeah. And I think, I think that personally diving into business, you have to think a little bit outside the box like that. You have to think of the things you're actually not just giving workouts, but you're providing them with, obviously, like you said, more bandwidth, meaning like they can get more done in their day. There's less that they have to worry about. And even for me, when I talk to people, it's like, they go crazy about the working out. And it's like, well, how much easier would your life be if you could get this taken out and you wouldn't have to worry about it that much or at all? You just go in and it's there and you just do it. And value is one of those things, and perceived value especially is, again, going back to your point about the bar, is like if there's a bar that's filled with people, there's perceived value there. Like there's probably something that's better about that bar than the one that's not. So it's the same thing. And I've heard you say this before too, is like no one wants to work with somebody who doesn't have clients. Like if there's if you don't show, or you're not at least telling people this is what I do, this is how I work with people, this is what I'm doing, no one's going to know, and then there's not going to be any value around it, and that's it, and you're not going to get any clients. And I think that a lot of people it's a very instant gratification type of time right now, where it's like, oh, I'm jumping to online space, so I need to have clients like tomorrow, or else that's it didn't work. So when did you start diving into fitness fully, and like to the point that you knew it would be like a career like this? Like when did you kind of like make the mindset shift of like, all right, like I'm going to try and make this my career? And or was it just something like, I know you said you started powerlifting, you started working at a gym, and you can still diving into the business stuff, because this is a business question as well. But when did you kind of make that shift and go into it?
Yeah, well, I was like before I worked at a gym, I was a carpenter.
Yeah.
I'm like a journeyman carpenter. I did concrete formwork, finished carpentry, built houses, built sky rises, built hospitals, prisons, all of it. And I love that job, man. That job is the best job I ever had, and I would do it in a second
Mhm.
if it paid better or took less time out of my day. But and it's funny, like I made a post once, like referencing Good Will Hunting, where it's like Matt Damon and Ben Affleck are standing
Mhm.
in the truck, and Matt Damon's just going to do construction for the rest of his life, and Ben Affleck doesn't going to fucking kill you. Um, and that's very much a conversation that me and Shallow had. So yeah, I'd worked at a gym for some time, and I'd left to do bobsled, and when I came back, I decided like I'm not going to go back to the gym, man. Like the money's not guaranteed. Like I just quit my job, moved across the country, ran out of money, got
Mhm.
lost in an airport, had to fly back
Yeah,
on
that
some
story's crazy. I heard that
yeah,
story.
yeah, like
I-
lived at an airport, was homeless, flew back, had no money, had no job. So I was like, I can't go back to a gym where there's no money guaranteed. Like I'm gonna get a job that I know I can do and someone's gonna pay me. So I went back into construction, did carpentry. And that's around the same time I met Shallow, and Shallow and me would talk about programming probably daily at that point, and exercise. And I'd send him voice notes when he was in Australia, and he'd call me at 2 a.m. and I'd be ranting about some shit. And he was like, listen, man, like you can't keep waking up at 4 a.m. and like going and putting wood on the wall. Like you got to do something that you're good at. You got to do something that you like. And like, obviously I talk about exercise more than I talk about types of wood and
yeah,
nails. So he was just kind of like, dude, if I get to Canada and you haven't fucking quit your job yet, like I'm gonna kill you. So I was like, I guess that's it, man. I guess I leave this and I do fitness. So yeah, I think that was the moment, man. Like Shallow was just kind of like, you should do what you're good at and do what you like. And again, it's buying back bandwidth. Like if I wake up at 4 a.m. and I drive to some construction site, I get back to my house at 7 p.m. and I go train, there's no bandwidth there for me to expand on, maybe ideas or things that I have in mind. And there's no way I can help really other people with that level of horsepower left. So I just kind of took the plunge and said, you know what, I'm going to do this again. I entered for the time being, like the commercial gym space again. I was like, before I move online with this, before I start teaching again, it's like I got to cut my teeth, get in front of as many people as possible. So I left carpentry, contacted a friend of mine who managed a gym and said, hey man, like I need a job, doing personal training. I was like, my goal is to train, like I want to gain as many clients as possible in the shortest period of time. Like I want to be in front of as many people as I can. I'm not really trying to waste time, not trying to do other bullshit. Like I'll just spend my entire day at the gym. So I went back into the gym and like just went at it, man. Like head down, knew how much money I needed to make a day and like gained clients as quick as possible. I went from, 0 clients day one starting back at the gym. 10 weeks later, I had 13 clients. Like,
Yes.
and it was, I just needed to gain more clients. And every month, I would set aside 2-3 hours, not only training the clients I had, but I set aside 2-3 hours and just try and sit down with people and do consultations, like move through assessments, move through motivational interviewing, move through programming and periodization. And like, if I couldn't service the client, I'll give it to somebody else. But my sole goal was to gain clients and keep that motivation in mind. If I was ever going to do this on my own, like you can't take your foot off the gas, right? Like I went down for the weekend, this weekend for 4 days to see my parents. Like they live, like 4 hours away and I don't really see them anymore. And I thought, I'm going to go down and see them. I posted a thing like, I'm not going to use Instagram. Like I'm off, like I'm going to give myself a break for the first time forever. And, I went down to Windsor and by the time I got back, I had 4 new clients. But I think it's just that mindset. It's like, yeah, dude, I'm going to check in Instagram 15 minutes a day. But if I log into Instagram, it's not to scroll through shit, right? Like I'm a product.
Business.
Yeah, I'm a product. I'm not a consumer, right? Like if I'm on there, I'm selling something. So, and to say that, like people need to understand, like when you say you're selling something, it doesn't mean you're monetizing and manipulating people to buy something, but you are you. Like you are now a product and you are selling that product. Like a sale is an argument that ends in somebody giving someone else money.
Yeah.
So it's like you just have to constantly be making arguments towards why you're the best or why you're different. So I don't think the idea of selling or sales or products needs to be taken negatively because we're constantly just selling ideas to one another. Like you're going to have an idea. I'm going to have an idea. I'm going to make sure when we're done talking that I'm right and you agree with me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, it's just about that in general. It's that I think sales are scary because the other person could say no. And it's more about like a knock on their ego than anything else. And when I first opened the gym a few years ago which I lived in New York for my whole life. And then
Yeah.
like I said, I just moved out here, but sales was the single hardest thing I had to deal with. And like coming from a point where I was 22 and I had to sell myself to people and I was like, what do I have to offer these people? And then like, I just started talking and just bringing value, as much value as I could, learning about things, listening to you guys, listening to, well, Jordan and Jinta at the time. But like, trying to bring as much value, and it's just hard. And it's hard when you're a younger person. It's hard when you are trying to sell yourself and you're not used to it. And like that stuff can be, it can be challenging. It can be scary. But like once you start having those conversations, it's just about having the conversations. It's just about getting better at it. And I'm sure the first time you tried to sell something to someone was not like this time. It's not like this weekend when you got 4 new clients. The first time it's probably like, yeah, I do personal training and like, and you learn from it every single time. And you just take a piece from the last one. You're like, oh, that went terrible, but like, at least I did this all right. And you take that into the next one. It's just experience. It's just like training. And I think that's a lot of coaches that I talk to that are friends or up and coming and they're trying to gain a clientele. They're very much people who are waiting for the right opportunity or, wanting to know all this before. And, I think in the mindset of we're alike in that, like, I'll do things just to do them and learn and just keep going. And that, like, I think that's a skill to have. And when people have that skill, they end up learning significantly faster than the people who don't. And I think for you guys, like specifically, and like I'd actually like to talk about that a little bit, is like the like your, I don't want to talk about your sales pitch essentially, but like what are kind of some of the keys that you have to like selling yourself and building that and being a little bit better about that stuff?
Yeah, I think the honest thing for people to understand is that conversations, regardless of what language is used or what you're talking about, or how much you want to like beat around the bush, like answers are always binary.
Mhm.
Like it's yes and no. And if someone says maybe, it's a no,
Yeah.
right? Maybe it's never really a yes, because if it's not a yes, it's a no. So I think people just need to understand that, all of these conversations are very binary, and much of that comes from the confidence to just get to the point. Like
Yeah.
I don't really have a sales pitch. I don't really have a strategy. I don't really have a method. It's very matter of fact. But I think at the same time, like I don't coach anyone who doesn't believe in me first.
Mhm.
Like I don't reach out to people who I don't know and see if they want coaching,
Yeah.
because that's an obstacle you have to overcome. And why would I want to do that? Why would I want to convince somebody that I'm the best to work with them and then convince them to then give me money and
Yeah.
then have to prove myself? That's insane.
Yeah.
It's insane. So it's like, but that being said, it's not like everybody believes in me. And it's not like I only talk to people who believe in me, but I just put in front of me so many things that would encourage people to want to work with myself, a
Yeah.
very specific clientele. So by the time I have that conversation, I'm not selling anything. It's matter of fact. It's
You're finishing essentially, like finishing the job.
like, hey, do you have space for coaching?
Yeah.
I'll have space in 2 weeks. It's this much. PayPal me at this address. So I think what people do is they set themselves up for a far harder journey by constantly trying to, you know, beat a screw in with a hammer by going after people who don't know them. And I think a big part of this, and you had mentioned it earlier, like success isn't measured by followers. It's not if you're the product. And people are looking at Instagram in very much the wrong way. People are looking at Instagram in terms of how an influencer runs their Instagram. Now,
Yeah.
an influencer is selling a different company's product based on their power of influence.
Yeah.
They have a large cone of influence. The product comes to them. They market someone else's product.
Yep.
Now, there's a lot of online coaches or prospective coaches or people who want to sell their own service on Instagram that are going about creating an Instagram as if they were influencing a third party product. They're trying to gain followers, they're trying to get people to their page. They're posting a lot of stuff that'll show up on an explore page, and they're talking about algorithms and all this dude shit that I don't understand. Like I don't know how Instagram works. I make like one post a month. I have no clue what some algorithm explore what's a reel. What's a TikTok? I don't know what any of these things are.
Yeah.
I can hardly fucking get the bubble with the words on the damn story sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's like people are going after Instagram trying to be an influencer, but they're just not selling their own service. It's like that's when you become the consumer and not the product, and you're going about Instagram the wrong way. If you have 50 followers, monetize the 50 followers you have. Like
Yeah.
they're already there. Reach out to them. There's no barrier of entry. They believe in you. And that's where I found it's like, dude, my greatest engagement, my greatest like growth or facilitation of Instagram as a platform of business is via stories.
Yeah.
I don't post any posts. I post like 9,000 stories.
Yeah. The Q and
You know
A's. I
why?
saw you just posted one too, right? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Do you know why? Because when you post a story, and I'm a schmuck, I don't know dick about the internet, but when I post a story or I look at someone's story, there's a little thing at the bottom that says send message.
Yeah.
It tells you to send a message. That doesn't show up on a post.
Yeah.
It shows up on a story. Low barrier for entry. Post a story, someone will message you.
Yeah.
They will put a thing in there because it's like you said, instant gratification. They see something and they can react to it right away.
Yeah.
To respond to a post, I have to go to the paper airplane, to click on you, I have to type some stuff in, and I keep my fingers crossed that you actually check your DM.
Yeah.
I'm going to respond to a story. So for me, I'm not trying to build a platform to influence someone else's product. I'm kind of the product. So I'm going to post daily stories every day, most of which are not me, they're my clients. I rarely post what I do. It's always my client doing something, and or somebody, listening to the podcast, or somebody signing up for skill acquisition. Like, I'm going to repost that stuff. And then, maybe once a month, or, whenever I have the bandwidth or the capacity, and, somebody drops off, or I find more time, or I've developed the systems that I use a bit more, I'll throw up like, hey, I'm looking for a client.
Mhm.
Well, somebody's already in the habit of clicking through my story, then it's like getting yeses. I'm just getting
Yeah.
constant yeses. Yes, they want to follow me. Yes, they want to watch my story. Yes, they want to ask me a question. Do you want training? Yes. I'll also keep writing in the box. The box keeps showing up until that little box is monetized. And it's
Yeah.
like, I'm saying this on your podcast so everybody can hear it. Like,
Yeah.
this is what I do. It's not secret. And it's not manipulation.
Yeah.
It's not even motivation. It's not anything. It's, I'm a store.
Mhm.
I'm effectively a product and a store myself. And to build a business, you just have to be, it just has to be a low barrier of entry to get to you. Why are you making your product so hard to find?
Yeah.
And like, I have a mentorship program. Like, I work with a very small group of,
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
of other people that want to start moving into the online space, like coaches that want to move into an online business. And I work with them all one-on-one. Like, it's not like a group setting. Like, we have one-on-one calls every week, and things like that. And with all of them, it's like, everybody who wants mentorship and inquires about it, I go to their Instagram and I try and find out how I can give them money.
And they can't.
That's the lowest barrier for entry. I just go back to them like, dude, I don't even know how to give you money.
Yeah.
Like, why are we talking about algorithms and reels and explore page and marketing strategies? And then should I pay for, direct to consumer? What are you doing paying for marketing? You don't even have a service anyone can find.
Yeah.
It's like, that's like wondering why no one calls you, but your name's not in the phone book.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's yeah, I mean, that's tough. Like, that makes sense. And like, thinking about it that way makes sense. But it's everybody who's out there, when you look at that stuff, is saying those things. Like, they're saying the opposite of what you just said, which is get more followers, get more influence, sell, and it's not a sell yourself as a product, it's sell a product, and like, that's actually that's a really good idea. And like, I'm just thinking about stuff there and just going through it myself. But that I think marketing's taken a turn for the worst because of those things, and that like, it's just about getting attention and not like actually utilizing the attention that you do have and going through that. And it just gets, because I know people who who do that service, who do like social media marketing, and like, they do other things, and it's a lot of money sometimes, and they charge a lot of money to do that. And just realizing that if you just take that time yourself and just even ask about that person, like your followers, ask them what they do, how they are, what they're doing, and like, just get that conversation started in some way. They're going to come back and ask questions. And my favorite way is, that at least I've seen and that I've tried, is the Q&A, because that's just, you're just telling them all the information that they need. And most people are looking for that information, but it's more of a validation of like, all right, he knows what he's talking about. Because like, you could give someone all the information in the world, they're still not going to do it themselves, And like, that's what we are for as coaches in fitness. Because I mean, I'm sure you think of this in the same way, but fitness isn't that hard for most people. And especially if you can I went over your skill acquisition template, like, I want to say a few months ago, when you first came out with it, like when you first released it. And like, looking at it in a way, I struggle with like visualizing things like that. But like, when I see it on paper, you read it and you're like, all right, this is like, even for myself, it's like, all right, this is cool to see. But like, you could hand that to somebody and they could make their own program. But it's just like, they want to see that as like a validation, like, all right, I'm going to give this guy my money because he knows what he's talking about. And it's all just so simple sometimes, and it's almost hard to realize, because there is so much, like, you see so many people on Instagram who are just peddling bullshit. Like, just, I see like sports performance guys who are doing like the most absurd things I've ever seen. Like, not to call anybody out, but like Joel Seedman is just like one of those guys where you see his stuff on Instagram. He's working with professional athletes and he's got them doing like nonsense. And it's just like, you don't need to be going that hard. And like, I've changed my perspective a little bit on sports performance since listening to Jordan and you and Jinta, because understanding performance is understanding the body, and then being more efficient. And I think that these movements that are happening, all this stuff around what's actually right, is just people not understanding and trying to fill the void with sexiness or
Yeah.
appeal of working out. So it's crazy. And and then this kind of gets into the next question I had for you, because I've heard your rants on this stuff,
Oh God.
self-care and stoicism, and why it's something that like isn't realistic for most people. And the reason I bring it up after this is because I think it's kind of in that same boat with working out, where it's like, to even think about the stuff that people are pushing, you need to be at a certain level of understanding. And I think people are skipping the level of understanding that they need and just going to the stuff that looks cool. And I think self care and stoicism are part of that, where it's like these ideas are really cool and they're deep, and if you can get to that point in your life where you're able to express yourself in that way, I think it's really cool. But stoicism. And I remember your specific example, and I'm sure you'll mention it, is the orange book that says "I don't give a fuck" or whatever it was, but it's orange. And like, I want you to kind of talk about that a little bit, because I think there's a lot of the notion that like to care about yourself and to feel good and to do this stuff, you need to meditate for an hour, or you need to do this stuff, and you need to think in a certain way. When really, if you just focus on your own shit, you're going to be better.
Yeah, like I've gone off about stoicism
And you
so
don't
much.
have to, yeah, and I know you have, and like you've talked about it a lot, so you don't have to dive too
No,
deep or whatever you're
no,
going through.
it's
But
totally fine, right? And like, dude, I roasted self-care and I caught so much heat about the self-care thing. But I think people need to understand, like, dude, I'm not against okay, whatever the language is, self-care. I'm not
yeah,
against taking care of yourself.
yeah,
Dude, I'm not against being happy and mental health. I am a huge proponent of mental health. Man, I've said it before, I've referenced it before. I have extreme fucking battles with anxiety myself. And like there's a lot that goes into that and that you have to do. But I think all of this lives and dies in when you click post to story. Like that's where it lives and dies and you losing the plot on it. Like stoicism is not posting that you're stoic. That's the anti-stoic movement of all time. Like if stoicism is about being inward, why are you outwardly expressing that you're better than people?
yeah.
That's the problem. It's like it just devoids all things about the death of the ego to then post it on a platform in which all you're doing is outwardly faceating things that you do. Like social media is basically all of your friends staring into your front window and your dick is out. Like, fucking close your curtains, dude, and do things for yourself inside. Like, you don't need to do that. So
Yeah.
I think it lives and dies. Like my problem with stoicism lives and dies that people don't really have many problems nowadays, or it's a perceived level of stress that's not necessarily an absolute level of stress. And I think stoicism is written by and written from the point of view of very privileged and safe individuals who at one point engaged in mass genocide and violence against much more underprivileged people. And now people who are majorly privileged are reading books on stoicism and ignoring the fact that some military general who murdered thousands and thousands of other people sat there and went, now that I've killed thousands and thousands of people, I'm going to meditate on how I can be a better person. Well, you, as a privileged person who can afford some $40 book and 15 minutes a day and a fucking iPhone and Wi-Fi, and no one's trying to murder and rape you, and you're reading the book and you're posting it,
Mhm.
is the same as the fucking dude who killed thousands of people and went, guess what? I could go on the best vacation ever in my own head. Yes, because there's 1,000 dudes with swords and shields protecting you. Of
Mhm.
course you could. Why could you not do that? But guess what? If you grow up with no food in the middle of the fucking desert, and maybe once in a while you get to watch a Hollywood movie and America seems like the greatest place on earth, and wearing a Versace belt and driving a Lambo seems awesome, that can also be awesome too. Like there's nothing to say stoicism takes the moral high ground,
Mhm.
but people who seem to like modern stoicism love the moral high ground. And I find great problems with that because
Yeah.
I don't think moral high ground exists. I think we're all selfish. And the more privileged we are, the more selfish we are, the more we ignore it. And guess what? Dude, just be fucking selfish. Selfishness is the greatest tool to humanity.
Yeah, I don't think it's bad, and I think it's viewed as bad.
dude, selfishness is the best. If people weren't selfish, there would be no philanthropy.
Yeah.
If people weren't selfish, they wouldn't give millions of dollars away to other people.
Yeah.
But they do because it makes them feel amazing. And that is so selfish.
Yeah.
It's so selfish to imagine this. A philanthropist is a guy who has so much money, he can give an exorbitant amount of it away to never get it back, to just feel good.
Yeah.
If there's a less selfish act, please tell me what it is. It's insane.
That's true.
It's the craziest idea. You're like, this guy is the nicest guy in the world. Look at him giving millions of dollars away. No, conceptualize the fact that he doesn't need to ever get that money back.
Yeah.
Like, I'll give some money away to charity, but it's money I truly need to go make back when I go to work.
Yeah.
Like, I'll give some money away, but I'm really like, when do I get that back? Like, when do I work long enough to get the money back I just gave away to that guy in the street? So it's like, dude, there's nothing wrong with stoicism, but just be honest that it's selfish and it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the other thing we lose out on is, like, philosophy is a way of thinking about thinking. It's not dogmatic in its approach to a way of being. It's a way of thinking about how you already think.
Yeah.
It's the understanding that we're all thinking all the time. And there's different schools of thought on how to do that thinking, how to conceptualize and compartmentalize the way you understand things. And when we get into stoicism or whatever, all these schools of crazy thought, we start to get very dogmatic in the approach, and it becomes inane and nonsensical. And if people are a stoic and they don't have Instagram, dude, shout out to you guys. But if you post Ryan Holiday on your Instagram story one more time, I swear to God. But no, it's craziness, right? And the self-care thing, it has self in the fucking title.
Yeah.
It's for you.
Yeah.
It's not for everybody else. Go away.
Yeah.
Go away. And if your ability to care for yourself stems from your ability to tell other people that you care about yourself, you are on a train where the tracks are running out.
Yeah.
The only way you can feel good about going to therapy or lighting a candle or reading a book is the idea that you have to tell other people you're doing that. You're not controlling the mechanism that existed previously that made you feel bad about whatever made you feel bad.
Yeah.
You know what it would be? Getting off of Instagram.
Yeah.
Just deleting it. Do it. If your life is so hard, how do you have the time?
Yeah.
How are you so busy? How are you so busy that you have the time to tell me how busy you are? I don't understand. You know what I mean? Like, and that's my big problem with it, right? It's like, there are truly hard things we need to do, all of us, that we ignore daily. It's just like you said, it's just like working out. Guess what? You're not good at squatting because you don't squat. You know what I mean? Like, if
Well, I think, and I was gonna not to cut you off, but like,
No,
I think
please
that's where
cut me off.
self-care needs to start, is that, like, it needs to start not at the easy of, like, like you've said, like getting your like or Jordan said, he was like, I don't touch my feet. He's like, I don't want like pedicures. It's like, it needs to start at, all right, what are my problems? Like, what are the things I need to fix? And like, for me, that was one of the things that I dove into, was like, what are my actual problems? Like, I want to care for myself, but like, like you said, avocado toast isn't going to be the thing that's going to solve it. It's going to be, what are the things that I really need to do to become a better business owner, better person, better, just like friend, family member? Like, what are those things that need to happen? And it's just about trying to test yourself each day to be better at that stuff. And I think that's where self-care comes in, but it often comes in as this, like you said, like this very high influence, like sphere of just like, oh, I meditate and I'm in my head, so I'm better. And it's like, well, it's also about the, and I know you guys talked about this with the training economics. It's the same thing as like self-care economics. Like, what are you actually doing when you do that though? Are you actually solving things? Are you actually going forward and taking those steps? Or are you just like, yeah, I'm thinking about my problems, they're still there, and I'm not going to really do anything about them. And like, I'm just going to use this time to get better at it, but like, just kind of like tell people that I do it. And like, for me, everything that I try to do now is within at least some learning curve or step moving forward. So when I do that stuff for, self-care or like just indulgence of what I'm trying to get better at, it comes with a purpose of trying to make sure when I'm done, I'm taking a step forward or understanding something a little bit more. and understanding those topics of how you think and philosophy, and understanding like, you know, yeah, things get hard, but they're going to be hard for everybody, and they're hard for you for a reason, but you need to figure out what the actual reason is, and not just fill it with like like I'm going to sit here and hope it's going to be okay, and like I'm just going to think about it being okay but not actually doing anything. And you know, this is where I have trouble with the topic, because I was someone for a while who was very against um like that whole thing, and like look, and not like, not looking inward, but like I was trying to solve problems, but I wasn't actually like sitting down to solve the problem. I would just think about the problem, and I would go into the normal, like, you know, Western society or whatever. I don't know if it's Western society, but it's just like the general mindset of like, oh, why me? Oh, why me? Oh, why me? Instead of being like, all right, well, like, you know, yeah, this is happening to me, but like, what are the questions I need to ask to actually solve that? And that's where like self-care starts to come in. So when you do meditate, or when you do go into those mental states of where you're trying to look inward, you actually have something that you can get an answer from, as opposed to just looking inward and being like, all right, well, where do I go from here? So it's just being better at asking questions, understanding that stuff, and then also understanding that like there are people who have earned the right to kind of be at a certain level and give back. But again, like you said, it is to give back, you need to be selfish. You need to have some type of point in your life in which you are caring about nothing else but yourself. Because if you're taken from an empty well, like what are you going to be able to give? You know, and what are you going to be able to move forward, move that needle forward with? And it's just, and it's oftentimes looked at as a bad thing to be selfish in a lot of ways. And it's just like, you don't know hard work, or you don't know, um, you know, you're kind of thinking of this in a backwards light. And it's tough, but I think that, you know, as people talk about it more, and I think it's one of those things that right now is at the upswing of its pendulum, and it's at kind of like its peak in terms of like, everyone's talking about self-care, everyone's talking about meditation, everyone's talking about kind of this inner state of being, and it's at this inflated place where it's going to come back down and actually be like, all right, well, what is the actual point of self-care? It's going to come back down to, how do we actually solve the problems that we need to solve, and how do you actually take self-care and make it efficient, and not just doing it just to waste 45 minutes in the morning and say you do it.
Yeah,
um,
I think what people don't realize is like you said, if the pendulum swings backward, it swings back to everyone who's doing it can pay their rent.
yeah,
And you know how you pay your rent? With money.
yeah,
Why is this confusing to people? Like, I have very little stress. I'll be honest with that. I have periods in which I have maximum amounts of stress. Of course I do. But relatively, I'm pretty low stress.
yeah,
Why? Because my rent is paid. I am not shy to say that. My rent is paid, and any money I make after my rent is paid is bonus money.
yeah,
And I have less stress because of that. But it begins at like, dude, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Do you have food, shelter, and safety? Yes, I have all of those. The pyramid of stress lessens as you go up. So the first thing people need to do is like, yeah, look inwardly, fine. Look inwardly at why you suck. Like, why does your life suck, and what are you doing to make it suck?
and
Like,
you
I don't
have,
have enough.
yeah,
I don't
you
have
have,
enough money. Yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, you have, you know, and as you were saying that, I was just thinking, like, you know, you have an experience where you didn't have a roof over your head, where you
Yeah,
were living in an airport, where you were homeless. You know, people nowadays, it's so, it like that hierarchy of needs essentially moves up to where this stuff's just there. There's no, you're never going to question if you have a roof over your head. You're never going to have and this is, you know, 90% of the people, but never going to question whether you're going to have food. You're never going to question whether you have, it's moved up to, oh, do I have, you know, X amount of money? Do I have X amount of followers? Do I have X amount of, uh, you know, other accessories, phones, clothes, cars, and like, when that has become the, and like you said, when you start thinking of that as the base of the hierarchy of needs instead of like the actual hierarchy of needs, you're on a track that you're going to end up falling off a cliff with. And it comes down to just understanding the whole premise of what's necessary in life, and then saying, okay, like once I have that stuff, it's like, all right, now I actually have what I need, and like literally everything else is extra. Like I have a place to stay, I have a place to sit down, I have a place to eat, I have food to actually eat. And then it's like, now I can do what I want to do. But when you look at that as something that's like there, no matter what you do, it's going to be there. You never have to worry about it. So it's never like, it's never, oh, I'm missing, or I have everything I need. It's like, oh, I'm missing out because I don't have the next thing. I don't have that. I don't have this amount of money. And then you put yourself in a bad state of mind for it.
Yeah, and I think like part of it too is people look at a lot of things. People are always looking at like the habits of successful people and whatever. I don't know what any of these books are, man, but whatever. They always look at what successful people do, and I'm guilty of it. I've told people I wake up at 3:30 a.m. So does Mark Wahlberg. But do you know why I wake up at 3:30 a.m.? Because there's a person who messages me at 3:30 a.m. I'm getting up because my phone is ringing.
Yeah.
And like all these people are just getting up really early. And they're like, oh, I get up at 4 a.m. every day because that's, when you got to get up. I don't know, man. I get up when my dick is hard. Like I just get up. Like I don't get it. Like if what you're doing is work, then it's directly monetized.
Yeah.
If you're not directly monetizing the time, just call it business development.
Yeah.
Because you're not getting paid. Yeah. And all of these people are in this false sense of time and where they go, dude, I had a guy tell me he worked 80 hours a week. And I asked him if he made $80,000 a month. And he was like, no. I'm like, then you must not be working. Because what are you possibly doing for 80 hours? I don't work 80 hours a week. I wish I worked 80 hours a week because I would directly monetize 80 hours of my time. I'd be living on an island. You'd call my assistant to book a podcast with me, but I don't. I probably work 22 hours a week, but that's directly monetized time. I probably do 80 hours of business development a week, but I don't get paid. So I don't count it. I don't look at that as my day. But everyone wants to add up all the hours before they monetize it. I saw it when I worked one-on-one in a real gym, right? People be like, oh, I worked 13 hours a day. They had 2 clients. They were in a gym 13 hours a day. It didn't work. It wasn't directly monetized. Dude, I don't work 13 hours a day. Work 2 hours a day. The rest of the time is business development, but it's business development. It's still something, but it's not directly monetized. So at the end of the week, when I feel tired or burnt out, I look back, I had this realization. Honestly, I had this realization on Friday. On Thursday, I did 9.5 hours on Zoom calls.
Damn. And one day?
One day, back to back.
Jesus.
Like I sat at this computer right here and I just kept end meeting, start meeting, end meeting, start meeting. I'd run to the bathroom and run back. And I did that for the entire day. Uber Eats catered my day. But what I realized was I was like, dude, that was crazy.
Yeah.
But it was a regular human day. Like that's what humans do. They work 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
And I looked at it's what normal people do. And I looked at the rest of my week and I went, how much more successful could I be if I just did that every single day?
Yeah.
Like I can do that. I can do that Monday to Friday, but now I pay myself. And I'm like, man, I did that for one day and it was a really successful day. What is stopping me from doing it the other days of the week? Because I don't want to. Yeah. And that's a terrible excuse.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that people don't realize, right? It's like, I did 9.5 hours of work, real work that was monetized. And I looked at the fact that I have the bandwidth to reproduce that every day. And if I worked 60 hours a week, I'd be 4 times more successful than I am now. And I just choose not to. And that's what most people are doing. They're just choosing not to do the lowest hanging fruit thing they need to do. And I think if you're going to look inwardly at yourself, like get a pen and paper out and just write down the facts versus stories, right? I work 60 hours a week. Story. Fact is you work 2 hours a week. How can you take those other hours that you perceive as work and find a way to monetize them? And dude, that might be the first step. And the busier you are doing things that you get paid to do, the less idle time you have to sit around and conceptualize why your life isn't great. And guess what? If we all worked 60 hours a week, probably have a big fat bank account and your life would be pretty great.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're right. I mean, I was one of those people because when I owned the gym, I was working a lot, but I was doing classes and like, it was one of those things where I was indirectly getting paid, but I wasn't directly getting paid for hours. And I was working on like stuff for the business, but like I would say I worked 80 hours a week And yeah, I didn't monetize any of that. So I got to change that. That's cool. All right. So I kind of want to make a transition
Yeah.
into learning and books since you kind of mentioned it. And I know you read a lot and that's something that you talk about. What are some of your favorite books in general? And then what are some ways, and you can answer this obviously after, but how do you continue to kind of learn and find new ways to like challenge yourself as as you gain new clients, as you gain new business, as you kind of step into more of like a educator? Like how do you actually as yourself challenge yourself more and more?
Yeah. Favorite books in general, like I can name any book.
Yeah.
Yeah, so favorite books in general would probably be Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, um, The Outsider by Camus, and what would be the last one? Fear and Trembling by Kierkegaard. I guess those would be like the three right now, if I had to name three of my favorite books in general. And I think they all, truly pay dividends, into thought process or business or just confidence and the ways of thinking. Um, but yeah, like I've chose Fear and Trembling at Kierkegaard. It's his book where he really starts to describe anxiety. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom,
Yeah, I
and I
heard you
think
say
that
that.
is
Yeah.
truly what holds most people back. Right? Is this dizziness of freedom? It's looking into an empty pit. The feeling you get in your stomach is truly the feeling you feel when you're anxious,
Yeah.
and it's just the idea that when you have ultimately all choices, choosing becomes so difficult.
Yeah.
Um,
That's when it becomes most important too.
Yeah, exactly, right? And I think the dizziness of freedom is altogether so true. And all of us feel it all the time where we go to anywhere that has a lot of options. You're like, I just don't know. They have vanilla and chocolate, you just know right away.
Yeah.
Um, like Fountainhead, dude, I love Fountainhead. Spoke about Fountainhead previously on a podcast. Obviously, there's parts of it I don't agree with, and I think work antithetical into itself. But like the character of Rourke, I think is amazing. He's a guy who works odd jobs in construction to support his dream of architecture. He's seems dauntless in his approach to his own doctrine and not being convinced otherwise. And I think, for better or worse, people need to understand that if you have discourse with someone who doesn't agree with you, it's not about either of you convincing the other one who's right, but in discourse with those who don't believe in you, it should allow you to understand your own thought process better.
Yeah.
I talk to people all the time who don't agree with my exercise philosophy. They never change my opinion. They allow me to better understand and communicate my own opinion.
Yeah.
And it's vital and it's necessary. And we should find discourse with those who don't believe in or believe alongside us. So I think that's entirely important. And like The Stranger by Camus, like I think it's honestly just a dude who realizes, at the end of the day, like nothing really matters, right? He says if death is inevitable, how and when shouldn't matter. And I think, that's something if we tied it back, to business and we
Yeah.
tied it back to exercise, it's very much the same way, right? It's like, gaining clients is inevitable.
Yeah.
How and when you do it doesn't matter. And somebody saying no to you, somebody not wanting your service is also as equally as inevitable. So
Yeah.
how and when they say no shouldn't matter, and you should just get them to say no sooner than later. And I think that's really important. But I would say like Camus, The Outsider, L'Étranger, would be like the most important book I've ever read, and it's Meursault is a character I think I relate to probably a bit too much, but I would say that's the big one. And I think all of those books you could take away something in terms of business or something in terms of training or just something in terms of being a person who's on a track to betterment in some way, I guess.
Yeah. Have you
Um,
ever read any? So I just finished Crime and Punishment, and then I'm
yeah,
moving into The Idiot.
The
Uh,
Idiot.
so that's one I was gonna ask if you ever read that one because that kind of sounds like The Stranger, where it's just kind of a guy who just is almost like this figure of uh, almost like a Joker kind of person, and he just doesn't and it. But with that joking mentality is like the reason for that is like giving up responsibility and not having a responsibility in life, and you can have that where you just like you're this person who just doesn't live by any structure or means, but then you give up responsibility in terms of like actually living your life and you live it to other people. But that's not the only reason I bring that up is because it sounds very similar to kind of the Stranger book.
Yeah. So yeah, like Camus and like sorry, like The Stranger and The Idiot would be very much like contemporaries of one another. Read The Idiot, loved it, thought it was great. So yeah, like those would be definitely contemporaries of one another. It's very much in some ways like an existentialist perspective, right? Of somebody dissecting things down to what they are in a factual sense, in a rational sense, versus like the irrational, tying emotions to things. And I think that goes back to facts versus stories. Like
Yeah.
what is something at its base first principles of what actually is it, versus attaching, irrational emotional understanding of it.
Yeah.
And it's not to say like we shouldn't be irrational or shouldn't be emotional. Like obviously emotions play a part. We're complex human beings, but we should first be as rational as possible and introduce in graded exposure emotion to that rational thought process. That would be my idea. And in terms of what I do to challenge myself, in a business or in an education setting, is make myself more visible. Greater your visibility, the more likely you're going to run into people with opinions that aren't the same.
Mhm.
Uh, and number two is build a bigger business, man. Like I so like in the mentorship that I do and a few of the conversations I've had recently, like since we're talking about the online space, I said to people, and this isn't to be taken as literally as possible, like not to do that, but to understand the thought process behind it is if you want to go into online coaching or you want to build a business that exists in the online space, your goal must be to make at least $10,000 a month.
Yeah. I
If
think that's the kind of the baseline of like where everyone, I know that's where I want to be. And I know that's where, that seems to be the number that's thrown around a lot.
and I think if that isn't your goal, if that's not your intention, go get a real stable 9 to 5 job with some type of health benefits and a schedule and a weekend,
Yeah.
because you're going to be better off. Because as great as working online can be and the ceiling is nil, it doesn't exist to the success that you can have as long as you just wake up every day and hammer the nail in. It comes down to the fact that it's like, man, if that's not your driving factor, like if you don't want to keep pushing towards that number, and that number, like you said, being the baseline, like that's the expectation, this isn't the marketplace for you, man. This is not the mechanism of your success. It's too much. And if I always say, like, you're either like everybody in the room with me is competing with me or they need to leave, right? It's like you either want to do that or you need to go and sit on the stands and watch. So I think that just comes down to like that's the mentality you have to have. It's never about being the best. It's about being the most expedient and it's servicing in the best way the people that are in front of you. But the baseline's got to be, 10K a month, and that's not to be taken in this, remunerative way. It's more to be taken in like this is the level of work and the level of drive I need to have and the level of ownership I need to take over this. Because if you're just trying to make, an average job's money, then dude, go get an average job. Because the fact of the matter is, if you can't secure yourself a job that pays you $4,000 a month in real life, you're not going to secure yourself an online business that pays you 10.
Yeah. And I think that oftentimes that number gets clouded because I think that, like I said, that needs to be the baseline for you. And you're right that like if you can't even secure a job that gets you, the base of $4,000 a month, you can't. And like working in that field of getting that type of money, like I think people misconstrue how hard it actually is. And but at the same time, it's like there is no ceiling with online training. There is no ceiling with where you can go with it. And if you have the right systems and you know the right people and you have the right setup, you could. I know coaches who help 130 clients a month, and they're charging $300 a month, and it's like that's absurd. And like dealing with that, but you have to be good. And you know that type of business is something that you need to strive for because it's definitely not just going to come. But at the same time, it's like, and I know this from personal experience because I had a part-time job growing up basically my whole life, and it was just boss tell me what to do, when you do it, show up at this time, you can leave at this time, and that's it. I was in school, I was in college, it was show up at this time, you leave, show up at this time, you leave. You have this, it's due by this date, and that's it. You graduate on this date and you're finished. And then I, like, as soon as I graduated college, I opened the gym, and it was like, there's no schedule. There's no one telling me do this. There's no one telling me do that. And what I found is that, like, kind of like you said, it's not about being the best. Like if you can make decisions faster than other people and then, change on those decisions and make better decisions based off previous decisions, you're going to get somewhere faster. And if you have the blessed being of having decision making and being the best at what you do, then like there's really no ceiling for you. And it's just really for me about decision making. So I've always been someone who's like, all right, well, whatever it is, I'm gonna make a decision. I'm gonna at least try it and then go from there. And then once you make that decision, you're gonna know you're either gonna be closer in the way that that's not it, or you're gonna be a step closer in knowing like, all right, I'm almost there. And like, it's cool to hear that type of stuff to challenge yourself. And because I think for me, it's really important for the people that I listen to that I always know that they're challenging themselves. Because I think it's really easy to become stagnant once you get to a certain point in your business. And like when you hear someone talking about like, I just want to keep growing, I want to keep growing, instead of being like, oh, I'm here, like I made it. And it's like, all right, well, like, what is next? And, growing is the hardest part. And that's for me where I've been. And it's just been trying to grow and finding those ways to challenge myself. And once you do that and you're able to do that, I think that, like I said, the ceiling is kind of unlimited in terms of that. And that's what makes it unlimited, is you being able to challenge yourself. And doing that in a way that, makes most sense. And I want to transition into the next thing that I want to talk about
Yeah.
is, and obviously we got to talk about this, which is the skill acquisition, the course, the template, kind of this topic in general. I kind of wanted to get a little understanding of like when you really started honing in on this and when it was something that you were like, yeah, like this is how I kind of want to. And I think I think this is something that everyone bases their training and life around. It's just whether they understand the actual concept of it and like the understanding of breaking it down. But you can go a little bit into that. Is like, I think challenging yourself is skill acquisition, and it's finding something, doing it in a cognitive way, doing it in an associative way, and then it becoming autonomous in your action and your function and your thoughts. So talk about that. You can talk about the course, talk about your template, where you can find that, or then go from there.
Yeah, no. So skill acquisition is honestly, in some way, its genius occurred when I started at a commercial gym like 8 years ago. Like I'd referenced this on a podcast last week. This book, The Five Rings. Like I'd gone to Westside Barbell. Louis Simmons told me to buy this book, The Five Rings. I went to whatever the bookstore's called in the States, and I bought this book, Borders or whatever. I bought this book, The Five Rings, and like the very beginning of the book, it's this samurai describing the idea that like it's kind of like your sword is a modality, and it's understanding the weight and the balance of the sword and what makes up the sword, and you know where the sword is in space and how you manipulate the sword, and it's like really living and understanding this. And I thought, for a barbell athlete like doing powerlifting, I was like, well, in a way, not to be like too hokey, but like the barbell is kind of like the sword of the samurai, right? Like this is the tool that I engage with often. Like I need to know how it works. Like I need to understand. At the time, like I had a far less understanding of biomechanics, but it's like I need to understand how I express force on a barbell via where my hand is placed, the grip that I use, if I squeeze more through my pinky, if I squeeze more through my index finger, if I wrap my thumb, if I don't wrap my thumb, my position. It's like allowing yourself to move around the bar, the bar not to move around to you. So I started to understand this idea of like the modality or the medium being the message, and then from there it just kind of built upon itself in terms of understanding this idea that like these modalities truly come with their own skill set. And based on, the modality is truly the intensity we can use. The intensity we use is going to drive something from, being very neurological, very, very physiological. And we saw, like probably a decade ago with powerlifting, getting more literature around it, we saw constantly these conversations of CNS fatigue and whatever, and this and that, and strength being a neurological adaptation over a physiological adaptation. And it just got me thinking, it's like, man, like there's so much talk of this barbell stuff being neurological and fatiguing the neurological. And I just thought, well, then it can't be physiological. It has to be way lower rent on the physiological side, because if I just get gassed often, from my brain overworking the skill of using this barbell, then it can't be the means of driving physiological change. It must drive neurological change. And if that's where it lives and dies, then that's where it should live and effectively die. And there needs to be more modalities understood in terms of their physiological adaptations and the qualities of them. So I started looking at my own training from like, man, there's all these fat dudes just using a barbell and just going home. And there's all these dudes who aren't fat using dumbbells and cables and machines and not looking fat. So there must be a merit to this. And then from there, it was, understanding this skill acquisition template. And I was like, how can I organize these thoughts in a way that is true or believed to be true and makes sense? So I looked up like Fitzposner in the skill acquisition template. And I'm like, oh, like if we look at this cognitive associative autonomous, this in all ways just looks like a workout.
Yeah.
Cognitive is very much warming up, right? It's mobility. Mobility is creating a safe enough environment or a great or a like or greater than stimulus neurologically to allow me to enter into ranges of motion that weren't previously accessible. Stability is taking that new mobility I've found and creating perturbations to some movement at the hip or the shoulder or the spine that I'm going to use later on, in which prior to adding load, I create a stress neurologically based on instability. I'm obviously not high enough in terms of an allostatic load to start to adapt to things because I've just been at the gym for 20 minutes. So stability is going to be a lower tier option to creating adaptation neurologically. Now that I've adapted to either the shoulder, hip, and spine in terms of perturbations to their movement or anti-movement, I'm now going to find an associative task to my sport. For the barbell athlete, maybe that's squat, bench, and deadlift. To the football player, maybe that's broad jumps or sprints or change of direction work, and that's associative to the game that is played. Or the barbell subsystem,
like jujitsu or like a fighting.
yeah, or it's rolling, right? It's doing drills, right? And then you go and drill a bunch of stuff, and then you'll notice that in everyone in the associative phase, the technical aspect of things wears off the longer you spend in an associative phase. Whether it be jujitsu and drilling new moves, whether it be running 40s or running plays in football, whether it be barbell squatting or deadlifting, it's the technical thing that drops off first. So when you have that technical criteria drop off, it's not to say you're physiologically incapable, but within internally stabilized movements, you're probably lacking the ability to move into a physiological output stage. So that's where autonomous comes in. And autonomous is simply finding like shapes that are externally stabilized or easier to do, in which we can autonomously move through them. A scrimmage at the end of football practice, rolling at the end of a jujitsu session, leg pressing at the end of a squat session for a power lifter. It's something that's externally stabilized. I'm able to move through that neurological fatigue very quickly and into physiological fatigue. And in most times, I'm able to find a modality that I can reach the same proximity to failure, but this time through physiological means. So I looked at skill acquisition, honestly, just fitting over top of a workout perfectly. And in its most pedestrian way, I think we all look at it that way. But what I realized is that we're all looking at it on a day-to-day basis, and we're not looking at it on a weekly basis in terms of internal and external aggregates or stressors to the athlete. And we're not looking at gauging or creating sessions that actually adhere to that allostatic load of the athlete as they move through a week or a block of training. We're just going cognitive, associative, autonomous all the time. Now, there are workouts that might just be autonomous. There are workouts that might just be cognitive and associative. And it's understanding how can I take, weekly volume numbers and the math behind it. How can I, modulate intensity and volume over weeks and blocks of training that not only adhere on a daily basis to this model of skill acquisition, but adhere in many more ways to, skill acquisition over the course of a week or a block, where we see an athlete move, from most specific associative means to less specific autonomous means, or vice versa. And then understanding how we can create constraints around movement to allow us to progress perturbations to what's happening at the core as a means of progressing movement versus just going time, distance, and load. So that's where the skill acquisition course was born of.
Yeah.
The skill acquisition course itself that I teach with Prescript, that will be inaugurated January 18th, is very much going to be a course on thought process. I'm not looking at giving anybody any answers. I'm looking at basically creating so many quantitative filters that when it comes down to coaching and programming, you buy bandwidth back by being expedient. Like we can assess so many constraints in training that the answers become one or the other.
Cool. That's awesome. I definitely want to get involved in that. Money's a little tight
great.
right now since the move, but I will definitely get involved in that. I have the blueprint though. Is that still available for people?
100%. So if you go to pre-script.com/skill-acquisition, it'll still be there.
I'll try
Just Google it. It'll tell you how to spell acquisition properly.
Yeah. Now I'll try to put the link below, but definitely check that out because there's a lot of good information in there. Is the I know the template you sent out. Is that available to people too?
Yeah. So actually, if you go to k2coaching.ca, there'll be a page that says skill acquisition templates, and there's actually specific templates now available for each stage of skill acquisition. Like you can get a cognitive only template, you can get an associative only template, or an autonomous only template, and all of those templates in a very specific way outline the rules or parameters surrounding each stage of skill acquisition, and you can simply drag and drop exercises into the template that you feel work best for you.
Cool. Yeah, and that's awesome. And like I said, if you guys haven't yet, check this dude out. He's popping up on podcasts everywhere, but he's also on the RX radio. Um, I appreciate you stopping by, Killian. This is an awesome conversation. And yeah, and like I said, if you guys have any questions about that stuff, or you are interested in doing the skill acquisition course or just learning more about that, you can always reach out to me and I can send you to Killian's way, or you just hop on Instagram handle.
Killian.Hamilton.
Killian.Hamilton or Prescript. All that stuff's on there, and they have all the information on pre-script.com. Yeah, so again, I appreciate it. Hope you enjoy the rest of your time in COVID or whatever's going on up there. How much longer are you guys in lockdown for?
Till the end of the year, man.
Oh, really?
We'll be coming out in January.
All right. I'm in Tennessee now. I don't know if you know where that is. If not, but there's coming from New York to Tennessee with like the whole switch up. New York is insane, and New York and Tennessee has been kind of like weird because like no one's really talking about it, but like they still like follow the restrictions. So I don't know, it's weird. But yeah, I appreciate you stopping by, and I'll let you know when this goes up. But thank you guys for tuning in. If you guys have any questions for Killian, follow him, hit him up on Instagram, ask him all the questions. He's got a Q&A running right now. We'll see you guys next time. Peace.